So I'm here with Charles Garby, and we're standing in front of your favorite tractor probably, but you couldn't really narrow it down.
Yeah, I would say it's probably my best purchase for farm equipment was the 7810. And I was just reading an article about 7810s, and some people think it's the best piece of farm equipment ever made, and that's pretty strong, but it's a really good tractor. I love the clutch. You don't need to use the clutch. The cab is so comfortable, and it's quiet, and it's going on 6,000 hours, and I don't think there's even been out. The mechanic has never touched it in those since we got it.
It's a power quad, isn't it? Or is it power shift?
I don't know what the term would be. You got 4 ranges.
Yep, so power quad.
You have to go to neutral, but you don't have to use the clutch to go to neutral to shift.
Yep. So power quad. What year is it?
It's yes, it's in the 90s, 98.
Okay. And you bought it 1 year old.
And yes, 1 year old. Friday Canning had it first year as a lease tractor. I think mostly it plowed snow in their parking lot. It had a nice loader on it.
Okay.
But I didn't need the loader, so they took the loader off.
And you bought it from Polfus, which
Yep.
is now Midwest Machinery.
Yes.
And before that, I guess it was Frontier for a while there.
Yes, the names are constantly changing. It's hard
Right.
for me to keep up.
Yeah, we went from having a lot of John Deere dealers to just a couple of John Deere dealers pretty fast.
Yep, it's pretty far and few between. It's nice to have one that's close. So.
And then speaking of Polfus, you were talking about the 8630.
Yes, this 8630, Polfus had it. It was around 2000. I've had it 22 years, and it's been a really good tractor. It came from Pete Shulkin in Lake Elmo. He's one of those farmers you hear about that keep their equipment immaculate. It's not heavy use, and he trades often, and he had traded this off. He put 8 brand new tires on it before he traded it, just to trade, touched up the paint, all of it, and it looked like brand new. And I used it a couple years, and then like all these 8630s, the engine gave out at around 6,500 hours, and that's where Kinsey was repowering all of these. And Polfus says, we can solve this, and they couldn't fix the old engine because the head was solid full of spider cracks all over the place.
Yep.
And you couldn't get any used ones because everybody had the same problem, and John Deere didn't make them, so you couldn't rebuild the engine. And they said, "Oh, we got our delivery semi. We're retiring, and we're parting it out, and it just happens to have a John Deere tractor engine in it. I don't know what the story is, how they got a tractor engine in their semi, but it's the same one that the 8630 came with new. And because the semi, you don't run at full RPM under full load every day of its life. It's got an easier life than a farm tractor. So the head in their semi didn't have any cracks, so it was rebuildable. And now we've used it. It's getting on 8,000 hours now, and we haven't had any problem. And I just love the tractor because on our farm we have a lot of spots where it's the water percolates down, comes with clay layer, and then on the hillside it comes out, and you get a wet spot. And
Yep.
with a two-wheel drive, you get stuck.
Yep.
And with this, you just go all through those spots. I don't have maybe 1 or 2 spots. Every other spot you can just go through like there's no wet spot there. It's just wonderful to have
Yep.
eight big tires pulling it, and so
Yeah.
that's the story behind that. And it had been turned up. They're 225 horse PTO at the factory, and it had been turned up to 275, the fuel pump. And I think that's why a lot of these motors gave out, because they weren't designed for that big a load. And so when they rebuilt it, they put it back at 225 horse,
Yep.
which was more than enough for our 30-foot field cultivator and 9-shank chisel plow. So,
Yep.
So that's the story to
I noticed one thing over there, the old mid-am sign, and then I noticed over here there's a DFA sign, right?
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, DFA became, or mid-am became DFA.
Yep, they kept expanding and expanding. And I was in the Young Farmer Program, and later on I was on the local board and quite active in DFA. So
When it was mid-am, who was your hauler?
D-Lander.
Oh, okay.
Yep, Pat D-Lander. He, right from the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, because Richard Knight did quite a bit, but I suppose he was a little bit south.
He would have been south, yeah, River Falls more.
Yep.
And D-Lander was more St. Croix County.
Okay.
So.
Yep. So then you mentioned you bought the bidirectional Versatile new.
Yes, and it's the only, almost all my machinery I buy used. I buy new corn planters, but everything else I buy used. I always buy as big as I can get, and I don't mind if it's used. Well, as my as my budget will allow.
Yeah.
And but I was worried that there's so few of these out there that some remote dealer at the other end of the state had one sitting on the lot for 9 months, and I was going to get that it sat in the sun. And if I was going to buy a new tractor, it was going to be fresh.
Yep.
So I says, well, put me in for a new one, and when it's my turn to come off the assembly line, I want it. I don't care how long it takes to get in line to get one. So that's how it is. And it just happened, it was just at the transition from Versatile to Ford.
Yep.
The ones before this were painted Versatile colors, and then I think it was a Cummins engine, but don't hold that to me. And then when Ford put their name on it, had the Ford engine.
So did you get this from O&R or?
This would have been Value Implement
Or
in Baldwin.
okay, wasn't it Triangle though before?
Triangle, yeah, it would have been Triangle at the time.
Yep.
Yep.
And
So,
yeah, because there aren't a lot of these around.
no, very few. We in 90, I had put up a 90 cow freestall barn, so we were fence line feeding heifers and cows outside in the summer, and we had silage piles outside and silage bags, and you can't load a TMR Wixer wagon with a Bobcat. You need a tractor, and you need a good one that's going to go high and reach in.
Yep.
And we were about due to a better loader, so I says, well, look at this. And then the same time, my dad always cut hay for years, and it was getting to be a lot for him to cut all the hay. And so we needed something better, and I tried a used windrower for a year, and they really worked great, but it was too expensive for our size. And the newer rotary ones that cut fast, they were just coming out. They weren't really an option at the time. So I bought the New Holland head that goes on this. It was a 14-foot hay-bine head.
Yep.
They just took it off of their hay-bine and made a bracket to fit on here, and the crusher went in between the front wheels.
Because actually, I saw some of these where they had the head on the front, and then they pulled a hydro swing.
Yes.
Behind them,
you
too.
had the option of engine and PTO. I didn't take that option, and
Okay.
you can get an engine and 3-point hitch too, but I didn't do that. And so we use it on our snow blower. A hydrostatic tractor is wonderful as on a
Yep.
snow blower because any snow takes a lot of power. You can really slow up. And on the wall there's a bracket. We had leaning up the steel on the wall. That's a bracket to push a cultivator. I had a 6-row narrow Danish tine
Yep.
for cultivating. And you put that bracket on the 3-point hitch, and then you mount it, and the cultivator went out in front.
Yep.
And that really worked good too.
Oh, good visibility. That beats either getting the cultivation mirror where you got to look down at
Yes.
that, or every time you turn around to check the cultivator, you usually
Yeah.
wipe out.
And you got the glass that's down low, so you can
Yep.
just so it, of course cultivating became obsolete soon after that, but we used it for that. I used it for planting. I made I was spraying at the time, so I put a tank on the engine end and set
Booms
it
on
up
the
for
front.
planting.
Okay. Yep.
And
Oh, you planted with this too?
I planted with it. Yep,
Okay.
planted and sprayed. I think it might have been band spraying at the time. That's why I was doing spraying at the same time
Yep.
as plant. So
What's-
that's got a lot of work on it. We've not, Ford engine, we have not done anything to that. We haven't done it. I had a couple leaky hoses. That's in 20 years, that's the only thing I've done to that.
Yep.
So it's, we don't use it much. We have the bulk fill, Pioneer bulk fill boxes, which are really heavy when you get up high and you're filling a bulk fill planter. And this works good on that because it can handle those heavy bulk. We
Yep.
don't need a transfer to go from the box
Yep.
to planter. We just hold the box over the planter.
Well, should we go in where it's warm then?
Yep, that's sort of,
So your farm, we should kind of give a general location, but basically you are within the Twin Cities metro area now, officially.
yes, we're officially part of the Twin Cities metro area.
Which, yeah, a few years ago they went ahead and said, well, we'll just jump the river and call part of Wisconsin the Twin Cities now.
Yep.
Um,
My dad started farming in Ramsey County next to St. Paul city limits in the late 30s.
Really?
And then he knew he was going to get pushed out, and he started buying some land in Woodbury to the east. And then when it was time to move there on that land, he says, moving 2 miles isn't going to gain me anything. I got to jump further. So in 57, then he came here. And now, after 65 years, we're starting to get houses around us again. But
Yeah, there's,
we don't plan on going anywhere in my lifetime. We'll let the kids worry about what comes next.
yeah, because there's literally housing developments all around you.
Yeah, 2 or 3 sides of me, yep.
And then you got, and literally you're in 2 minutes, you can be basically in Hudson. You know, you're at the movie
yes.
theater and
Yeah, I'm right next to the freeway entrance, so we can just
Yeah.
zip in. We're 7 minutes from downtown Hudson.
yeah. I bet the changes that you've seen, because even in my lifetime, I can remember Hudson being, River Falls still being a farm town, where River Falls
Yes.
still had, I can remember the New Idea dealer, I can remember Equity,
Yep.
and now River Falls there's very little agricultural about River Falls, and
Yes, it's pretty urban. Hudson, yeah, was even before that, lost any agriculture. We had Gilbert Motors, that was a Pontiac dealer. He was the very end of the Alice Chalmers dealership.
okay.
But
And-
that was the only implement dealer in Hudson.
Yeah, I can remember the drive, because see, we'd always go to Fleet Farm. You know, we'd either go to Stockman's
Yep.
or Fleet Farm, and boy, the drive up to Fleet Farm, when you came the back way off of 35, there really wasn't anything And then what, 89, something like that, they built that dog track. That was about the first thing that kind of popped up right around there, and then it just exploded.
Yeah, yeah, it goes in spurts.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really related to the economy. When the economy's bad, the building stops in Hudson, and now Hudson's sort of slowed up on the building. The school's facing a decrease in school enrollment, which is really hurting their financials because they got a lot of buildings to maintain, and yet the state payment per student is going down and down because the school enrollment's decreasing so much. Everybody's aging in place.
yeah. Well, and the problem, I think, part of it too is Hudson got relatively expensive.
Yes, Hudson has always been where it was a big 3M resident town. It's always been a home for the executives, which tended then to be higher priced homes.
Yep.
And so that sort of filtered everything, got a little bit higher in Hudson. So the difference between River Falls and New Richmond versus Hudson is quite a different on home prices.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, gosh, and I remember when I was a kid, they started that, who was that farm where they built that? It was a Rumley farm, right? That they did that Troy Byrne
Yes,
development.
Rumleys were one of the first developments in Troy Township. Yep.
And yeah, that was, I mean, $1 million house is nothing in there.
Yes, that's all. They had to leave so much open space, and they would set up the rules that allowed them to make the golf courses or open space.
Yep.
So then every house was basically on the golf course, so that made it attractive for the $1 million house.
Yeah. It's, yeah. It is crazy, to think about what it was to what it is now. I guess it's my look at it, even in my lifetime, I own land and, a farm, and yeah, they go, oh, look what it's worth now.
Yep.
But it's kind of sad to think, if you wanted to buy adjacent land to your farm, or say you had a family member that wanted to farm with you and buy adjacent land, you can't.
You can't, no. I officially retired as far as managing the farm in 2015. And my middle son, Roger, wanted to farm as a part-time job. So I rented him half of my tillable acres and I sold him my machinery. And so that's how I got out of the farming business. And
Now you help him?
now I help him, yep. So,
But going back to Ramsey County in Minnesota, so were they kind of close to the Washington line then in Ramsey County? So it'd be Washington, Ramsey County.
yes, we were in Ramsey County. On one side of the road was Ramsey and the other side was Washington.
Okay.
Washington County and Woodbury Township.
Yep. And the amount of development around Woodbury, Lake Elmo, has been amazing to see too.
Yes. My grandpa's farm was the first development in Woodbury,
Okay.
which was just a mile from where my dad's farm was in
Okay.
Ramsey County. My grandpa was across the road in Washington County, in Woodbury.
Yeah.
And that was in 56 or 55, something. And
Oh, the Twin Cities in your lifetime has grown. I can't even imagine how big it has grown. So back then, where up there, where did the milk go? Where did you ship milk?
well, it was Twin City Milk at the time, and which was a big part of the formation of Mid-Am.
Okay.
and that was always fluid milk. The first ring of farms always was fluid milk. Of course, it's out to Ellsworth and further out now, but in the beginning, the fluid was always the farms up close. And our milk always went to sanitary farm dairies was the biggie, and then later on, the Land O'Lakes plant in Woodbury, and
Which is, that's a Kemp's up there now, right? Or
I don't know who the Dean's Foods had it, and then they licensed to sell Land O'Lakes milk, and then they went broke, and I don't know who was but it's still going. I don't know who owns it.
Yep.
And Schroeder Milk is another big bottler, and Kemp's, which is Mid-Am, or DFA now, in Minneapolis, are the big bottlers.
Okay. So did you kind of see the transition to Mid-Am and when that formed?
Yes. Well, when I was a kid, River Falls joined into Twin City Milk, and Baldwin joined into Twin City Milk, and Land O'Lakes, and it was continual expansion as it went out, and then all of a sudden, instead of the Twin Cities area, it got to be the Midwest, and then with DFA, it got to be national expansion. And
so DFA started with Mid-Am. DFA didn't buy Mid-Am.
DFA was 4 co-ops. One of them was DFA.
Or was Mid-Am, you mean?
Was Mid-Am. Yep.
Okay.
I think Ampy had one branch in there, and there was several other big co-ops like Mid-Am that did DFA.
Okay. Huh, I knew they were nationwide. I mean, they were way out west and in the Northeast, and I mean, everything. Yep. They were.
And some will say then they got too expansion minded. They were more into being a national fluid milk supplier, that any bottler anywhere in the nation, they could just go to DFA and get their milk, and which left a lot of local spots they weren't competitive in, so they had their issues.
Yeah, I heard some complaints that they got big and they could kind of push out small cooperatives.
Yep, and some of the little ones could outpay them because a well-managed small one could make more money than the overhead of the big.
They really didn't have that much of the market around Ellsworth. Ellsworth was so strong with the Ellsworth Co-op Creamery.
Right, there was some farmers. They had some farmers there, but yeah, the Katy Cheese and Ellsworth, and there was plenty of local good plants.
Yep.
There wasn't good options up in our area.
No, and you had, let's see. Well, Hastings was kind of close to the metro, and that was Polka Dot Milk and stuff. They were fluid milk.
They were one of the little ones that did it right, and they were making good money. Yep.
So then your dad moved here in 57, you said?
Mm-hmm.
So was this farm an existing dairy farm when he bought it?
Yes. You may have heard of Charlie Ward. He was executive for Brown and Bigelow, and he owned a core of 6 farms. And he was a wealthy businessman that enjoyed buying purebred animals and showing them, like James J. Hill and a lot of the famous executives at the time. And he had a show heard in Fancy Holstein's by the truck stop in the JR Ranch at exit 4 on 94. And here he had a Guernsey, registered Guernsey herd.
Okay.
And he bottled milk here. In the milk house, they bottled milk here. So we bought, then he died and they broke that all up and we bought one of those
Okay.
those farms. So it was, the barn was very nice. It was, yeah.
Well, mentioning Guernseys, the Guernsey, it's kind of sad what happened to the Guernsey breed, because at one time the Guernsey cow was known for their superior health qualities
Yep.
of the milk, and that golden Guernsey was an actual trademark. Like you
Yep.
could bottle milk under the golden Guernsey, and it was a big deal. It was like a health thing, and Guernsey percentage of the breeds. I mean, obviously Holstein became the dominant breed of all dairy cattle,
Yep.
but Guernseys were significant at one time, and they just, I mean, they have disappeared.
Well, the story I hear is that these people with a lot of money were buying up all of the prize genetics and upping the price on buying quality Guernseys so that the average farmer couldn't compete. And so that made going to Holsteins more attractive. He could get good genetics there, whereas Guernseys were high priced because he had to beat price. He had to compete against the executives that had their show herds. That's what I always heard as a big problem on the spreading the Guernsey breed, because they were a good animal.
Well, yeah, right down by me, there were a bunch of Guernsey herds. I mean, my farm was a Guernsey herd, it was a John Shoemaker farm. And that was one of the, I mean, pretty famous Guernsey herds in the country. And yeah, now there's such little bit of Guernsey. Jerseys have grown their share, you know.
Yeah, the Jersey with their protein and butterfat, yeah.
Yeah,
Crossing them and, yeah.
right. So, but when you think back to like the 90s and stuff like that, I mean, some of these breeds almost disappeared.
Yeah.
You know, it just. So I'm assuming you guys milked Holsteins then.
We were 100% Holsteins, yep.
So then that barn, if it was a show barn, like he had built it, were the stalls small for the Holsteins?
Yes, we eventually redid the stalls, and it had an antiquated headland barn cleaner, and there was just chain went out and came back again. And when we put in a circular modern barn cleaner, then we updated the stalls
Okay.
and made them larger. I think we went from 52 stalls down to 48 or something.
Okay.
We made them wider and longer.
Yeah. Yep.
And then in the old show barns, they had the high manger front, concrete front in front of the cows.
Yep.
The theory is you always kept the feed right there in front of the cows, but in action, they threw it over the top and onto the alley. And you couldn't sweep it in, you had to manually get it over. So we got rid of them right away too.
Well, and if a drinking cup goes, it just runs right down into that
Yep.
and makes a
Yep.
friend of mine had those curbs in his barn, and he hated them. So that barn there, we'll talk about the Harvestore, but the Harvestore was there when you.
Yes, when we moved here, and that was part of this show herd business. I assumed they were going to show that they were state of the art and had this one of the first Harvester silos, and come see our farm. We're one of the top with all the changes.
So was this an expensive farm for the time then?
No, I think it's like all farms. It's so much per acre, and they throw in the buildings. And it was attractive because it had good buildings, but I don't think it upped the price that much.
Okay. And back then, there probably were, we think of it now, I mean, there isn't hardly farms for sale. But back then, there probably were farms available.
Yes. And we were talking about not being available now, and I that's why I started talking about my son. He needs to get some land as a base, and it just isn't, you can't get it around our farm. I mean, the price of land, because has this quote developmental potential, is just priced it out way out of a farmer's consideration.
Yes. And the problem is, say you want to sell and move somewhere else, where are you going to find a farm that has that much acreage at,
Yeah,
it's
even in St. Croix County, if you move, it's hard
right.
to go far enough. But you get down into Pearson and Pepin counties, and that, boy, all the farms that are active, and it's a lot different than St. Croix County.
Yeah. Well, and St. Croix County is odd from the standpoint of very different from the land on the west side versus the east side.
Yes.
It is
yes.
vastly different farms.
We got good land in the middle, and on the west we got sand, and on the east you have the heavier, colder ground. So yes, we don't have quite the quality that Pearson, Pepin have. It may be more rolling, but the soil's better.
Yeah. Yep. So then, when you moved the cattle, the herd. You didn't sell the herd and start over.
Right. We moved everything. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Moved everything over here. Yeah.
So were you driving equipment on? It would have been Highway 12 back then,
Highway 12. I don't remember how the tractors got here, but everything else came on a truck. Yeah, I think the tractors would have been driven.
So was there, would you have crossed in Old Hudson? Because this was predates
Yes.
I-94.
Yes, the first bridge from the Eisenhower era is 52 or something.
Yep.
That was there, yep.
Okay. So, yeah, and I'm assuming Hudson was a farm town then.
No, Hudson was
It was still,
a bedroom community.
was it back then?
Yes, and part of the problem with Hudson is that Ward, who lived here, and encouraged all his executives to move out here and buy up the farms. So the farms right around Hudson were not farmer-owned, even
okay.
though they were operated as farms. So that took them out of the farm picture and the farm community.
Okay.
So that made Hudson urban, from the 40s on.
And I suppose, too, those were the farms that easily were developed because you had guys that weren't interested in in farming, production farming, owning farms that they didn't want to farm.
Yeah, they weren't handed down family to generation. They were, every few years they were up for sale. So yeah, there was always land available, and so a developer could get in there and grab one.
St. Croix County, or western St. Croix County, is full of farms that were relocated.
My dad made a list, and he has a list of 100 families, farm families, who moved from Woodbury, for both sides of 94 in Minnesota, Woodbury Township, and then on the north side, the Lake Elmo Bayport community. 100 families that came to St. Croix County because of the urban, not necessarily their farms went to housing, but like we're talking about, you couldn't buy the farms because of you couldn't expand because of the land values.
Yep.
So they just said, we're leaving. And so, so you got the Harvestores and the Zwalls and Heimbachs and just a ton of St. Croix County farms that are where the grandpa started in Minnesota.
Yep. So then, what year did you graduate from high school then?
64.
Did you come right to the farm then?
I went to River Falls for 2 years, college, and then I finished up at the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
I wanted to go to University of Minnesota because my dad they had a 2-year ag school up there in his day, and I just had been exposed to it a lot, and that's where I wanted to finish up. And my cousins all went to school to college, and it was just what my peers were doing, so that's what I did. But I knew I wanted to farm all along, so I came back. And
Was your major, was it dairy science or animal science, or was it?
farm management was my
Okay.
major, which was a broad category. I studied all soils and animal science and management. And
So then you graduated in 68 from
69.
69. Okay.
Yep, I had some Army Reserve there with the Vietnam era in the middle there that delayed me a year.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, were you worried about getting drafted?
They got a deferment for 4 years, and I wasn't going to get out in 4 years. So then I signed up for the reserves in Ellsworth,
Okay.
and that allowed me to continue my schooling. And yeah, so then I graduated in 69 from college.
And then came right back to the farm.
Came right back to the farm. Yep, Barb and I got married in 70, and then the first couple of years we worked for wages. And then when Dad was satisfied I was in this for real, then we started a partnership for probably, I suppose, in 1980. Then I started buying him out.
Okay.
He was real good about me getting started. His dad was real good about him getting started, and we had a loose arrangement where he would provide the machinery in the partnership, but any repairs or any new repairs were 50-50, and then any new machinery was 100% my responsibility. So then gradually over the next 10 years, as his machinery got replaced, I gradually then ended up owning the machinery. So it was a gradual changeover that helped me. And,
Yep.
and I rented the farm in the beginning when we were on our own, and then he didn't give me anything, but it was a reasonable price he put on the farm, and so that helped too. And so when we went into, everybody had the problems in the 80s, I had a good mortgage with Dad, and that was his retirement, my mortgage payments. And then I bought some land too, but I did that in the early 70s, and that was all contract for deed.
So interest rates were a lot lower.
Interest rates, well, it would change every 5 or 10 years as my contract for deed came up for renewal. But I didn't have the bank saying, "Oh, your collateral's changed. Now you need more collateral," and which a lot of farmers had the problems. And
Yep.
in the 80s, your 100 acres of land is only worth half as much, so now you need more collateral. When the contract for deed, you don't, and
Right.
the seller holds the mortgage, you don't have that problem.
Well, and I know I talked to an older farmer about that one time and had bought it, late 70s. The price dropped. He was struggling to make the payments. I mean, and he went to the seller, the land, the mortgage holder, and it was, well, you can either work with me or you can get it back, and nobody's going to buy it right now. So they worked it out,
Yep. The contract for deed was a good deal. Yep.
Yeah. So
Sure
then,
got us through the 80s.
okay. Yeah, because 80, you're starting out, and yes.
And had a lot of mortgage payments for a lot of land, and that they were fair and locked in for long term. It made it doable.
So then, when you actually partnered with your dad, did you expand then? Because I'm assuming when you came back to the farm, you almost need a little bit more income to support another family.
Yes, that's why I bought some land right away to get a bigger land base. And then in 1985, we put up the freestall barn, and we went from 52 cows to, well, eventually we had 120, 130 cows.
Okay.
So yeah, we expanded the base. And then when that 130 became an odd size for a single farm participant, that's when I quit milking.
Yeah, and you built a parlor, which around here in 85, there wasn't a lot of parlors around. It was still pretty much tie stall barns.
Yes, and maybe I shouldn't, but I sort of blame that on the the salesman for
Lester's?
Lester's. If you go Goodhue County, that time every farm that expanding was going to a side opening surge parlor and a Lester's barn. St. Croix County, the salesman said, we can put 30 cows on the end of your barn, make a manure lagoon for you at a fraction of the cost of building a freestall setup.
Yep.
And he was right. But when you go from 50 cows to 75 cows, that's great. But then when you want to go from 75 to 175, then you got to bulldoze it all over and start over.
Yeah.
You can't expand. You get over 100 cows, you can't stay with a barn cleaner, and so that's why we ended up. And Lester's, they had no competition. They had the premium single story stall barn edition out there. There was no competitors. But if you went to a milking parlor, well, anybody could sell you a pole shed, so then they had to compete.
Yep.
So that's why I think St. Croix County ended up with hardly any milking parlors in that, 1970s.
Yep.
And when county just like Goodhue was wall-to-wall milking parlors from the 70s.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, some of these stall barns were added on multiple times.
Yep.
Just, add here, and, yeah. So who built your parlor?
I'm my own contractor.
Okay.
I went to Aero Building Center in River Falls and told them the dimensions I wanted. I researched what the stall size was going to be. This was in 85.
Yeah. There was no internet. You didn't Google it.
There was no building of anything going on.
Yep.
And Aero Building Center was glad to design the barn and the material list and that. I hired our house carpenter that we used to do building maintenance. Him and I and a college kid, we built the freestall barn.
Okay.
And then I had Weezer Concrete. They were glad to sell me the slatted floor.
Yep.
Probably the only barn they built in 85. And then with the manure pit, I didn't want a precast pit, and they steered me to a contractor that would pour the pit. And then...
and Weezer's, we should add, Weezer's back in 85 was actually selling ready mix too.
Yes.
Did they haul their ready mix up?
Yes, the ready mix trucks came all the way up from, what town are they in?
Well, it'd be Plum City.
Plum City, yes, up here. And I can remember the pit was dug and it had loose dirt piled around, and the trucks there was no pump. They didn't have manure pumps. Cement pumps. They drove on this loose fill, and got stuck, and then they would hook on with another truck, and they would go around with 2 trucks hooked together so they could get close enough that the concrete could just slide right off of the truck. Yeah, things were different in those days. Yeah.
Would that have been, that wouldn't have been Blodgett's that were the contractor, would it be?
It was a Nelson from East Ellsworth somewhere.
Okay.
A couple miles east Ellsworth, there was a Nelson
Okay.
that did did the poured basements for houses,
Okay.
and he did this poured basement.
So you had a slatted floor then?
I had slatted floor, and that was sort of a transition period. If I would have went with Lester's, they were used to an insulated warm barn.
Yep.
Before then, they had fans and insulation and kept their barns warm. Mine was one of the first naturally ventilated. I went to Waseca and University of Minnesota had a barn they built for their research farm, and my cousin built one like it in Woodbury, and I built one like the Waseca barn. It was a slatted floor, and it was T-shaped. I never expanded and put the other part of the top of the T on, but it could be.
Okay.
It would, and that was always my thing. When you build something, how are you going to span it, even if you don't think you're gonna?
Yep.
And the answer to my question was, it's L-shaped, and I can make it a T-shape if I decide to expand, but I didn't. And the parlor, my cousin that built the barn like I did, his best buddy sold Surge out of Baldwin.
Oh, out of Steiner?
Steiner, he worked for Steiner, and he gave us like at cost for the material.
Okay.
And as long as they didn't have to engineer anything. So then my house carpenter did all the concrete work for the parlor, and I really got it cheap.
Okay.
And it worked great.
Yeah, the cold barns, as it turns out, were way better than warm barns for
Yep, but you never knew how it was going to work out because there wasn't a lot doing it, and you always worried when you're that radical different. And of course, my big mistake was not making a drive-through.
Yeah.
It mainly became obsolete in 15 years because everything was fed from a feed bunk inside.
Yeah, were you feeding with conveyors?
And you had to deal with silo unloaders all the time and feed conveyors all the time. It took a lot of time. And so then after the 80s, then all the barns were drive-through, and it's funny how things can be so obvious later on, but at the time, nobody had a drive-through barn, so you didn't think to make a drive-through barn.
Yeah. Did you like the slatted floor?
It worked great. In that time, the winters were cold, and I was worried when it was going to freeze and the manure froze on top, how bad were things going to get? And I had a couple times where I had 6 inches of frozen manure on top of the slats, but it always warmed up eventually, and I never had a problem.
Okay.
And now in this climate, you can have a flush system and never hardly worry about having manure frozen in your alleyways. So and nobody was doing this, and when we would stick the pump in to agitate, the pump was in the barn.
Yep.
And we'd open up all the windows, and you worried, are the cows all going to tip over from the gas at night? And we just never had any problem. I guess I knew because pig guys were doing this, and they could leave their animals in the barn while they were pumping. So
we had pit fans at Mom and Dad's on the hog barns. Did you have a pit fan or just?
Nope. We decided that wasn't necessary.
Okay. Huh. Were you bedding with straw or sawdust?
I started with sawdust. That's why when it was real easy to get, Loggy got it out of Anderson Windows.
Yep.
And I used a lot of straw, and then a lot of sawdust, and then in the end, it was a mattress. It was a canvas with some shredded rubber in between, folded over,
Yep.
and with sawdust on top of that.
Yeah, because I was going to say a sand barn with a pit under the barn would be tough because there'd be a lot of buildup.
Yeah, just like the drive-through was the way to go later on, then later on the pit wasn't the way to go because you wanted to use sand. So.
Right. Yep. So, yeah, you can always think ahead, but it seems like there's something that's going to come up that.
Yeah.
Just,
So then you say today, what's so obvious that we should have been doing now that they're going to do in 10 years? You know, it's.
Yeah. But was the labor savings with that setup versus the stall barn, was it significant?
It was significant. The problem is though, when you hired labor and you only needed the milker for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours at night, what are they going to do the rest of the day? I mean, in the summer you can use them, but if they're only available for 4 hours in the midday to chop, that doesn't really, that's a problem too. So like I said in the beginning, it turned out to be a size that if I was two brothers or a father and son, then you could make these odd splits for milking work.
Did your son didn't take an interest in the dairy cattle then? He didn't?
No.
Okay.
No. And I was out of cattle for 15 years when he decided to farm.
Okay.
He was just grade school when I built the barn. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's when you did decide to sell the cows. Then, did you miss it at all?
No, I loved it for 30 years, and now let's do a different chapter in my life, and let's do 15 years of grain farming and get a kick out of doing that. And I always said that if I would have farmed for free. You wouldn't have had to pay me to farm. It was just something I really enjoyed, and I would have milked for 30 years free, and then now 15 years of crop farming. I just I doesn't miss it at all. The responsibility of labor and the like. Same period you went through in the early 2000s, the thing was to milk 3 times a day.
Yep.
And BST and man, that's hard on managing labor.
Oh.
How are you going to get somebody to come in the middle of the night for 3 hours? It's hard. And then they will do it for 5 days a week or 6 days a week, and then guess who gets to do it on the weekend when you're dead tired and it's your day to catch up,
Well, and years ago, and it's funny, I've had a little bit of help from college kids with UWRF so close. Mm-hmm. Used to be you could find college kids that were definitely looking to milk cows, and college kids today, a lot of them don't want to work when they're in school.
I did 10, 15 years when my labor all came from River Falls at the college, and the things have changed. So just like you said, in the beginning they all came from 45 cow farms, and they were lots of them, and then later on they only came from the big farms, and Dad wanted them home on weekend, and the big farms, they were affluent enough, they didn't need the money.
Yeah.
So why should I go to school and then go out and milk cows in the middle of the night? It didn't. Yeah. It wasn't where they were headed. So that just sort of dried up. The few kids that wanted, that's when the 300 cow dairies were getting going. They could go at a fancy new dairy, and the previous generation dairies weren't attractive for the college kids. So that dried up. So then I had to hire minimum wage people fighting urban job businesses, and the quality was not good, and I just couldn't pay a top dollar employee for the size farm I had.
Yep. So then it was an easy choice then to just go to, which really in 2000, I mean, you had some LDP years in there. The crop farming wasn't super lucrative then either.
No, but after 30 years of farming, though, I got the mortgage paid off, and that frees you up to experiment, like selling the cows and going crop farming, selling the cows. You can use that money for updating your cropping equipment, and so when you don't have big mortgage payments, you can do that.
Yeah, so then had you grown soybeans ever before, or was
Yes, we always, even in Minnesota, we had soybeans some, yep.
were you selling them as a cash crop, or were you roasting your own?
Cash crop. We tried the roasting, but that was just because we had them.
Okay.
We didn't raise them to roast.
So did you go to PV or ADM with your crops then?
Our corn's always gone, well, it was Gavilon that changed the name every
Yep.
other week.
Yep.
But on
Red
the river,
Rocks up there.
Red Rock, yeah, that's the universal name.
Yep.
Our corn beans have always gone to Red Rock in recent times. Before that, Hastings Co-op was a good local buyer of
Okay.
crops with the small guy with the small truck,
Yep.
and we never went with. We always had a truck, but we never had a tandem truck or a semi. So
Okay. So then, did you go completely gone with cattle and gone with forage then when you sold the cows? Was it?
I transitioned. I rented I boarded Dornick's dry cows, and then later on heifers for 5 years. 3 of those years, they were 12 months a year in my freestall barn, so that I gradually made sure I used up all my feed, and it was a gradual transition to get rid of my forage equipment. And the Dornicks had bought my cows,
Oh, okay.
and that's how we got the working relationship started. And I thought they were very trusting for letting me take care of their dry cows. But that changed when BST came in, and they started going with just a couple week dry periods, and they didn't need somebody to house their dry cows for 6 weeks.
Yep.
So then we switched over to heifers, bred
Okay.
heifers.
And then when they were gone, you were done with.
Yes, and then after that, we pastured heifers in the summer for quite a while. But we're so urban, we were constantly in the middle of the night. Car accidents would take the fence out, and middle of the night heifers would be loose, and everybody's taking all their line fences down. You know, when I was a kid, a cow got out, it never left the farmstead. They would just go around the corner and stay there and eat. And nowadays, heifer gets out, they just. So I said, enough of that. We aren't just to graze the pasture. You don't make any money on that. So we eliminated all livestock about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Could you plow up your pastures? Were they?
Yes, we just finished doing that, and I think like 75% of the pasture we farm now.
Okay.
With the new, we are no-till beans, and we are minimum till corn. We field cultivate the bean stubble.
Yep.
To mix in the dry fertilizer that got spread, and then we plant the corn on that.
Yep.
So that really cut down on erosion, especially, and then when you get 200 bushel crops of corn, the stalks you get, it's so we can farm this hilly land that was pasture and not have any erosion. So yeah, we were lucky to.
So did you have a combine? Well, you said you always had soybeans, so you had a combine the whole time.
Yes, and I was always conscious that we didn't have enough row crop to afford a top-notch combine. And my first combine was an 815 International, which was a monstrosity. The corn head was not gearbox. It had a 12-foot roller chain for every 2 rows. And it would weave in and out of the sprockets on the 2 rows. So you'd have eight rollers for each 2 rows. And that chain would stretch, and if you didn't keep that perfectly tight, it would wear the sprockets just like in one day, and you would have to be replaced. It was just horrendous. And if you had any grass, it would wrap on the tips. Oh, you only had 2 speeds of the cylinder. You had to change big sprockets. Oh, it was the dark ages. And this was when John Deere had the 44 and the 6600.
Yep.
So finally I got smart and got rid of that. And then I got a old tired 4400 John Deere. And it was a good combine, but it was old enough that it took a lot of repairs. So then I went for a while trying to get custom harvest. And it worked for corn, but not beans. So many years, you got 1 week to do beans. And if you don't do it, well, custom harvester was never here on that 1 week, you know.
Yep.
So I'd end up drying beans. So I went back buying a combine, and then I got a decent 6600 combine, and then 22 years ago we got this 9510.
Okay.
And because we don't have tons of acres to put through it, I don't know, the cylinder might have 3,000 hours, so it's, you know, it's getting 3/4 worn out, but it's been a wonderful machine. So that's our combine now.
So then were you doing high moisture corn for the dairy cattle?
No, we never got into high moisture corn.
Okay, so you always ground out of bins or corn cribs before that?
We always ground feed every week, feed grinder. That was, when I was a kid, that was my job. We had a hammer mill in the granary, belt driven, and I got pretty good as a early high school kid, putting that belt on, lining it up and being ready to go. And it had the granary had a corn bin on one side and the oats above, and we did that in the beginning, and then we got smart and got a grinder hammer mill that was on a cart and PTO driven, but would blow it up in the barn. And Dad made a feed room upstairs in the barn, but it was still tons of shoveling. Everything was flat floor. That's wrecked my back. Dad, he would load the corn and then put on the truck and then put oats on the top and then dump out a couple sacks of protein. And my back hurt so as a high schooler kid, I ended up just shoveling on my knees. My back just couldn't. The short handle, shovel.
Yep.
You know, we were dumb. There weren't long handle shovels.
Yep.
So, but then we went grinder mixer for modern times. So every week we ground.
Did you grind out of bins, or were you picking corn then?
We ground out of bins. We always use shelled corn usually at the end with the grinder mixer. Yep.
And then did you raise some oats too, or barley or anything?
Yeah, we had to have straw for the heifers.
Yep.
Yep.
So, what did you when you chopped? Did you have a pull type chopper? And
in the end, we had a 900 New Holland.
Okay. And you're pulling that with the 7810 at the end, or
1980, I bought a 4620
oh, okay,
from Meyer Implement, John Deere dealer in Baldwin.
yep,
The tractor was 10 years old. We needed a chopper tractor and a plow tractor. We had the 4320, but I needed more power, something bigger. But the engine was shot. And I assume it's like the 8630, somebody had turned it up, and 10 years was all that engine could handle being turned up. And it's just like the 8630, you couldn't buy a head. All the heads for that motor was, maybe it was the same heads that was on the 8630, I don't know. You couldn't rebuild them. So instead of, with Kinsey repowering all these John Deere problems, John Deere finally got smart and repowered with John Deere engines.
Yep.
So Meyer Implement says John Deere now makes a brand new 4850 engine right in a crate, total everything engine, not a block or short block.
Yep.
The whole engine, everything. And we can buy that, and that'll fit in your 4620. I says, okay, do that. So I went from 130 horse factory to 190.
yep,
And 190 horse in a 4620, that was awesome. So for about 20 years, that was the chopper tractor and the plow tractor. And the only problem was I didn't buy bigger tillage equipment. If you geared down and lugged it, the clutch would slip.
yep.
The clutch wasn't made for that extra 60 horsepower. So I just kept the equipment I had and just drove it in a higher gear, which didn't work the clutch any harder.
Yeah.
So to answer your question with a long answer, that's what was on the chopper.
Did that have a roll guard cab on it then?
Yes, it had a cab. Yep.
Well, they could be loud in the cab when you're running the PTO on them.
Well, that's why I got rid of it and got the 7810. You reach that stage of, well, for 20 years I've been putting on earmuffs because of the loud noise, and you plow and you got to open the windows because there's no air conditioning, and then you sit in a cloud of dust and, oh, this is a good tractor, but I got to have a nice sound guard cab.
Yeah.
So we went with the 7810. And
So when you bought the 4620, is that when they put the engine in, or did you just run it for a little while and then?
they put it in right away.
Okay,
They had traded it in with a ruined engine.
okay. So yeah, 4620 was, I mean, that was a good sized horse in
Yeah.
81.
That was, and they didn't make it for long.
Yeah.
It was the size bigger than the 4320,
Yep,
and I think it sort of replaced the 4520.
yep. Yeah, the 4320 was kind of a sweet spot. I always say the 4320 kind of, when the 4320 came out, that became the new 4020, because if you look, obviously the 4020 outsold the 4320 because they only made the 4320 for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But given, if you would have introduced the 4020 and the 4320 at the same time, it probably would have been a different story. And if you look, 4430 was the number one seller, 4440 was the top seller, 4450 was the top seller, 4455, like that. And then, you know, from 4455, it went 7800, 7810. And those have always been, because to a dairy farmer, it was, you wanted to have a big tractor that could do the big work, but you still needed to do 540 PTO work, and you needed smaller stuff. And that's where that size tractor has been so good for farms.
And we were putting, you know, when you're a dairy farmer, we were putting 400 to 500 hours on every tractor, you know.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the 8630, if we get 50 to 70 hours, that's it, you know. But dairy days,
Yeah.
they had a lot of hours you were sitting in that cab.
So the 4320, how long have you had that?
I bought it a year old.
Oh, really?
A gentleman in Minnesota, in Lakeland, did canning crops. And he was sort of like me later on. He was middle of July, he had harvested beans and he was doing second cropping and plowing in the middle of July, and he couldn't stand being in the dust and the heat in that cab when there was the new generation cab out. I apparently sat in one and took one demonstration, and he said, that's it, I want the new tractor. So he traded a year-old tractor in to Hark Implement, the John Deere dealer in River Falls. And he got the new tractor in the cab, and I got a year-old tractor with the old style. So
probably saved quite a bit.
So I had the tractors from 73, and I still got it, but now it doesn't hardly get used. It was for a while, it wasn't worth anything, so why sell it? Now everything's worth something. But now the grandson sort of claimed it his tractor, and he takes it in the parade and can't sell the grandson's favorite tractor. So
what happened to the 4620?
Well, we had plenty of tractors and it wasn't going to get used. It was just too good a tractor just to get 50 hours a year on it. So I sold it. And a young man, southern Wisconsin, bought it. And he just knew it was a cool tractor because I had it repainted after 15 years. So the paint was perfect. And this engine that was in top shape, it was very appealing for a lot of people. And he was a kid and liked this big, powerful John Deere that was unique, and he bought it. And so we sold it because it wasn't going to get used.
Okay.
It didn't matter that it was an awesome tractor. I mean, when you're getting $15,000 for it, let's sell it.
So you don't miss it then?
Not when you got the 7810, no.
Okay. Now is the 7810 your last new tractor you're buying?
Yeah, well, Roger's doing all the buying now. He's got one more year. I gave him sold him machinery on 10-year lease to buy program, and then this next year's the 10th. So after that, he'll have money to spend on new equipment, but he hasn't bought anything in the 10 years he's been buying me out. So
okay.
But you know, it's everything works, but we don't have anything that's set up for auto steer. You know, we would have to replumb it. And our 7810 doesn't have the plumbing in ready to. So, you know, it's one of those things like a good cab and all of that. Eventually you reach a point where, you like the auto steer.
I still don't. I could. But I don't. I don't know why. Maybe it's stubbornness. But,
But if when they start coming, you know, all you got to do is buy the monitor, then it changes the picture, you know. I think that...
Well, I got one tractor that's got the valve in it.
Oh, well.
So I suppose having a family that's interested in the farm is probably a lot of the reason you're still farming at all.
Yes. Personally, it just made my life so much easier that our son wanted to farm. Because my machinery wasn't new, but it was all in good shape. And to get your money out of that, it's hard. And I just looked at, you sell it at an auction, the auctioneer gets a big cut, the tax man gets a big cut, that I can just take that cut and off the price and sell it to my son for what the net would have been for me. Gives him a bargain and I get the same amount of money. And it was just easy for me to retire
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and this way you didn't have to retire so much. Like if you would have, if you didn't have family, you'd have sold the equipment, rented the land out, and then you're done.
Then I'm done. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Then everything's different, And then it becomes, why am I hanging on to these farm buildings if I'm not using them?
Right. And then things start to go downhill and
Fast.
Yep. So it's got to be, you know, it's got to be kind of neat to have someone to take over, or otherwise, you almost kind of, what's the point in doing it if?
Yes. 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 It's nice. Yep. And it's been a good transition. I try not to. I try to limit my fatherly advice to only occasionally. I keep asking him, how am I doing? But he hasn't complained yet, so I guess I'm doing all right. So he's sort of making his own decisions, and it's fun to watch him go through that where he's comfortable making the decisions. Because he was working in town for 10 years, so he was, and didn't help on the farm during that time. He was, his mind wasn't on farming, so he was really starting from scratch. He wasn't just driving my tractor, and now the next day it's his tractor. It was that 10-year break in the middle.
Yep. Probably makes him, well, probably appreciated it.
Yeah.
Getting away from it.
Yeah, he likes the freedom and challenge like I did of being your own boss.
Yeah. Well, we should probably show the parlor if that's all right.
The parlor doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, but the barn and
the
stuff.
barns.
Yeah.
We can do that.
You got rid of all the parlor itself and the pipeline, the cooler, all that?
Yes, I kept the heifers after I sold the cows in case I had regrets. And then when I didn't have regrets, I had an auction to sell the heifers, and then stripped the parlor and any remaining forage equipment. Everything was sold.
Okay.
I see so many farms that quit, and the hay equipment's just out on the fence line and all of that, and let's get a couple bucks for it and get it out of here. So
Right. So, but yeah, it's kind of neat, that era of parlor, because that wasn't a very long time frame where parlors were kind of, or freestyle setups were designed like that. It's
right, yeah, it was a very narrow window. Yep, they
Yep.
changed in a hurry.
Yep. And still upright silos versus, now everything would have been bunkers. If there's a parlor, it's a bunker. And
Yep.
So that's kind of neat. We'll have to show that Harvestore too.
Yep.
All right. Here's the milk house, a precast milk house, and you've loved your milk house, right?
I love my milk house. I designed the barn. It's a takeoff of the University of Minnesota barn at Waseca. And I really like the Weezer products, so I put in a Weezer slatted floors and the Weezer precast on the milk house. I saw so many milk houses from the 70s where the wood was rotted out from all the water day after day, and so I wanted something that was maintenance free, and it really worked out to get the Weezer
Yep.
precast.
And then you'd still see the sign.
Yep, the old Mid-Am sign is still hanging in there.
Yep. And then you had a hospital in this part. So you had three stalls for treated cows.
Yep, it
fresh
had a
cows.
hospital, it had a utility room, milk and parlor, and then the milk room with the milk tank.
Yep. So, but it was only used for 15 years.
Milk for 15 years, and then 3 years of dry cows.
Okay. Yep. That's pretty cool. We better look at that Harvestore.
Okay.
Here's the 14 by, let's see.
40.
14 by 40 Harvestore. And got a Herc in it, looks like. Yep. Little Hercules. This is the Probably the oldest Harvestore in existence then.
The story I had was the second harvester built in Wisconsin in 1949.
Yeah.
And 49 is when they started building harvesters. It had an older unloader in it originally. We had problems with it because the 14-foot is too small a diameter. The harvester always works with the principle of it build a bridge in the center of the feed, will fall down in the middle, and the weight of the silage will only be supported by the outside,
Yep.
say 1.5 feet of feed on the outside. So your unloader's only digging in 1.5 feet. This would make a bridge, so the unloader's got to dig through the whole radius of the silo.
Yep.
And if during the night it settles down during the night, you got the weight of the whole silo sitting on the arm and the chain. So then it's a forward, back to get the chain to work again. It didn't. You needed a 18, 20-foot diameter to make the
Yep.
work. So it was just a new idea that didn't really work out. And we had a problem because our feeding, it was put on the floor. It was great for pulling out. The floor was the height of the unloader. But that meant somebody had to fork the feed into the feed cart.
Yep.
So times have changed. They know better how to make it.
Right.
I should tear it down, but I just get attached to old things.
Yep. I hear you. Well. All right. Well, thanks.
You're welcome. Glad you could come.
Yeah.